Hello everyone, welcome to the CA3 Climate Action and Advocacy on the Airwaves podcast. My name is Simon Evans and I welcome you. This project was undertaken with the financial support of the University of Calgary's Mobilizing Alberta Climate Action Grant Program. We are broadcasting on 90.9 FM CJSW in Calgary. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. I hope you enjoy your time here on the airwaves as we dive into the world of climate action.
A seashell, a butterfly, a feather, a rock, and a sand dollar. I'd like you to reflect on which one of these items you feel connects you the most to the climate crisis. I'll go first. Hello, my name is Paige. I'm a Master's of Clinical Social Work student at the University of Calgary. At the same time, I'm a practicing social worker that works alongside individuals experiencing homelessness. I chose the rock. I chose this item because it reminds me of a particular individual that I worked alongside who would often gift me rocks. To them, rocks were a symbol of strength, and the act of gifting rocks represented connection. To me, in this context, the rock symbolizes the disproportionate impacts that the climate crisis has had on this population that I have witnessed drastically increase over the years. It has brought the climate crisis to the forefront of my mind. It is distressing to witness, let alone live, and difficult to ignore. This is the typical icebreaker of a climate cafe, an empathic space where emotions about our climate crisis can be safely expressed. In this episode, I'd like to introduce you to climate cafes. We will explore their origins, why they're so different from other climate events, how they're helping people cope with the emotional side of climate change, and how this could, ultimately, lead to climate action. For this episode, I had the privilege to sit down and talk with a facilitator who has been running climate cafes for 3 years at the Faith and Spirituality Center at the University of Calgary. Throughout her experience, she has witnessed, firsthand, the benefits of providing a safe, non-judgmental space for people to talk about their climate emotions. I will also be sharing my own experience attending a climate cafe. My hope is that this personal touch not only inspires you, the listener, to try one yourself, but continues the transformative potential of connection and vulnerability, the very values that are at the heart of every climate cafe. So I know I've shared my personal connection to the climate crisis with you, but I'd also like to explain why I feel so compelled to spread the word about climate cafes. As I mentioned, I'm a master's student in clinical social work, specializing in trauma-informed care, a field where I've delved deeply into the nature of trauma, exploring its many forms, its profound impacts, and the tools people need to cope and heal. This understanding drives me to bring conversations about climate trauma to light, and climate cafes offer a unique space for exactly that. Trauma takes many forms, but systemic trauma, deep harm embedded in societal structures, is often overlooked. Climate change is a form of systemic trauma, caused by systems prioritizing profit over sustainability. Its impacts go beyond physical devastation, like extreme weather and displacement, and goes into grief, anxiety, and anger, fueled by a sense of betrayal by those in power. Seeing climate change as systemic trauma reveals it's not just an environmental issue. It's deeply social and emotional, revealing the urgent need for collective healing and action. It is in spaces, like climate cafes, where this is formed. So what exactly is a climate cafe? Unlike workshops, webinars, or lectures, climate cafes are not about finding solutions or discussing science. They're a space to connect with others about how difficult it is to live under a climate crisis. It is to feel connected and to figure out ways to support our well-being. Who are climate cafes for? Literally anyone. You can be someone that constantly thinks about climate change, or someone who never really does. You can be someone who actively participates in climate movements, or someone who doesn't. The Calgary Climate Cafe brings in all of the above, and the facilitator has witnessed them all benefit in their own ways. Where did climate cafes come from? Climate cafes trace their roots back to various cafe movements that started in Europe that were created for people to talk about complex, emotional, and taboo topics. Take death cafes, for example, spaces for conversations about death, dying, and grief, aimed at helping people make the most of their finite lives. These early cafes proved that, in a supportive, non-judgmental setting, people can dive deep into even the toughest of subjects. So, why climate cafes? In the early 2000s, as climate change dominated headlines, psychologists noticed a rise in climate anxiety and climate grief. People were overwhelmed but lacked spaces to share these emotions. So groups like the Climate Psychology Alliance began exploring ways to help, and the idea of climate cafes took shape. By the early 2010s, the first climate cafes appeared in the UK and Europe. These spaces offered comfort and connection, and the word quickly spread. During the pandemic, many went virtual, making participation accessible worldwide. In fact, the climate cafe I attended was held online by the Climate Psychology Alliance. I was initially hesitant to attend an event like this online. I thought to myself, if the purpose is connection, how can you fully feel the emotions of others without actually sharing a space with them? But I was quick to be proven wrong because I was, in fact, sharing a space with them. It may not have been physical, but it was the emotional space of climate change is happening, it is real, and it is scaring me. To be vulnerable with you, I remember walking away from my climate cafe feeling emotionally exhausted. I had brought forward emotions that I had hidden away for a long time, and on top of that, I was absorbing other people's heavy emotions as well. It wasn't until these emotions had passed that I realized my experience mirrored exactly what climate cafes were designed for. I don't want this to scare you away. Even in asking the facilitator what's one thing she wished people knew about climate cafes, she emphasized that it is not a scary place. Sure, there are going to be crap moments that don't feel great, and heavy emotions are going to come out, but climate cafes, as she suggested, are the perfect space to weather through them. I promise that I will walk you through a climate cafe, but I want to dive a little bit more into the difficult emotions I've been talking about first, specifically climate anxiety and grief, and why it is so important to talk about these emotions. So firstly, climate anxiety can be understood as heightened distress related to the climate crisis that is characterized by a variety of strong and interconnected emotions such as worry, fear, sadness, anger, and powerlessness. Climate grief, on the other hand, refers to a great sadness about the loss of nature and species, about a lack of safety, and about unfulfilled potential. It was in this definition that the facilitator found connection, and is something that she brings into each of her sessions, highlighting that you can't have grief without love, and these emotions are merely a sign of our attachment to the world. And they are not uncommon. A 2023 study in the Journal of Climate Change and Health examined young Canadians' emotions about climate change, revealing widespread fear, sadness, anxiety, and helplessness. Many participants expressed negative views about the future, such as hesitation to have children, believing humanity is doomed, feeling like they have less opportunities than their parents had, and disappointment in people for failing the planet. The study also highlighted the value of discussing climate emotions as a coping strategy. However, participants reported rarely talking about climate change and often feeling ignored or dismissed when they did. These emotions are rational responses to the climate crisis. However, they are unsustainable, especially when not talked about. They can create apathy and burnout, causing people to hide or retreat and become paralyzed, unable to act. In trauma-informed care, it is believed that the best way to deal with difficult feelings is to slow down, pay attention to those feelings, and talk through them. This needs to be done, of course, in a safe, non-judgmental environment. Unless we can process our internal responses to climate change, we're not going to be able to respond appropriately to it. Hence, climate cafes. Now, I do feel it's important for me to stress this point here, as it is stressed in much of the research I've done on climate cafes. Their purpose is not action. You will not be led into a discussion of action, encouraged to take action, or shamed if you are not already. The purpose is simply emotion, vulnerability, and connection. However, as I'm sure you're catching on by now, action is very often an indirect result of climate cafes. Through vulnerability and connection, people can sort through complex feelings and grow able to tolerate them. Anxiety, grief, despair, these can all be transformed. From denial to resilience, from resilience to action, and all the better when you have a sense of the collective. One teaching that I received from my interview with the facilitator that stuck out to me the most was how she identified the various forms of climate action. There are people that push for change in government and policies, people that push for technological, scientific change, and then there are people that push for change in relations, minds, and hearts. And this is where climate cafes hold space in the action world. She described climate action as a cycle. Frontline activism isn't sustainable without mental health support, and the mental health support often inspires you into action. Remember when I talked about climate cafes being for anyone? This is the prime example of the various benefits that people in various stages of climate awareness and action can receive. Activists can find some reprieve, and those newly grappling with climate change may find some motivation. Now, allow me to take you on the journey of a climate cafe. Imagine yourself in a welcoming setting. It could be a cozy cafe, a library, a classroom, someone's living room, or even your own if you're tuning in online. You're gathered with others, a warm drink in hand. In the center of the space is a bowl filled with natural objects. For example, a seashell, a feather, a rock, a butterfly, and a sand dollar. This might sound familiar to you. The facilitator invites you to select an object that connects you the most to the climate crisis. This opens the floor for introductions as each person shares their connection to the chosen object. Once introductions are complete, the group moves into a free flow of conversations, connecting their shared stories. This phase fosters intimacy, care, and a sense of interdependence. It is common for someone to hear their own concerns in another's story, kickstarting the collective bond as people begin to realize they're not alone in their worries. The cafe closes with each participant sharing a word or two that reflects their experience. For me, it was relief and connection. Relief because it felt like a breath of fresh air to sit with people who truly acknowledge the climate crisis. Connection because I left knowing we're all navigating this together. Interestingly, the facilitator shared that many of her participants shared the same words and explanations as well. So this is the simple yet powerful format of a climate cafe. It may seem like a casual discussion. However, climate cafes do follow specific ground rules to ensure safety and support for all involved. Confidentiality, for example, is essential. Thoughts and feelings shared with this group stay within the group, creating trust and encouraging vulnerability. While I can share the structure of a cafe with you, individual experiences and stories are held in confidence. Equally important is the principle that all emotions are welcome. Climate anxiety and grief are common, but they are not the only feelings people bring. The climate crisis brings on a plethora of emotions, and everyone deals with and responds to it differently. This inclusivity ensures everyone has the opportunity to express themselves and feel heard. One of the most challenging but essential principles is to avoid fixing emotions. This is the instinct to offer reassurance or optimism in response to difficult emotions. A very typical response in our culture, as it is hard and oftentimes uncomfortable to witness people in pain. While often well-intentioned, it can invalidate someone's feelings. In a climate cafe, there's no need to fix or brighten emotions. Instead, participants are encouraged to simply sit with those feelings and allow them to be expressed. Reflecting on my own experience, I realized I sometimes found myself trying to fix my own emotions. After sharing, I'd quickly try to soften my words with a but and a glimmer of hope. I'm not sure if I was doing it as a way to ease my own discomfort and vulnerability or to protect other participants from my negative emotions. Either way, I was doing myself and my peers a disservice. One participant even shared that they sensed people needed hope in the group and refrained from sharing where they were at. Luckily, our facilitator reminded us of the ground rule that all emotions are welcomed, which brought us back on track. With all this being said, I would not be a social worker if I did not have a critical lens. I want to preface this part by saying my intent behind sharing my critiques is to not discredit the value of climate cafes, as I hope it did a good job at highlighting their importance in the climate action world. However, I do believe that all groups, programs, agencies, and practices need to be critically analyzed in order to grow and improve. Accessibility and diversity are two areas of concern that I had, from both my own experience and through research. This critique didn't go unnoticed by the facilitator. Luckily, she has always had a diverse group of participants attend her cafes, perhaps due to the location being on campus where students from different backgrounds have access to. However, she acknowledges that it often goes unnoticed that marginalized communities are the most impacted by climate change and are already living sustainable lives, but are often told to do more, without recognizing that they may not have the resources or the capacity to think about being better climate citizens. The best way to engage these communities, she suggests, is to provide them with a space to talk about their experiences with climate change without the pressure to be better and do more. With this understanding, she's not only able to have a diverse group of participants, but is able to formulate discussions around this topic to better support various communities. My climate cafe experience was a bit different. I'm a white woman, and I was surrounded by all white people at my climate cafe. It was something that I couldn't help but notice in the moment, and something that was reaffirmed in the literature afterwards, as a common critique of not only climate cafes, but the term climate anxiety as well. There is some literature arguing that climate anxiety is a white-dominated emotion. As Sarah Jacket Ray highlighted, although anybody can have climate anxiety, the term itself seems more applicable to people who haven't experienced existential threats before. Those that have experienced existential threats such as colonialism, slavery, genocide, tend to view climate change as just another layer of threat. Sarah Jacket Ray is the author of a field guide to climate anxiety. She wrote about this observation as she realized those resonating the most with her book were overwhelmingly white. Anger, grief, despair, hopelessness, these emotions are not new to those that experience oppression. Climate change, however, has exposed these emotions and the prospect of an unlivable future to those long shielded from oppression. What is newly overwhelming to the privileged is long-standing for marginalized groups. As I reflect on Sarah's writings, it made me think about the premise of climate cafes and how they're closely related with the resistance of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other equity-deserving groups. They cultivate resilience by protecting hope and joy, and they do so by calling on community. My critique is not to say that people who are newly grappling with the climate-related emotions don't deserve these spaces. Rather, it's that climate cafes need not only be diverse, but also honor and acknowledge the long-standing efforts and experiences of marginalized communities who have been on the front lines of these issues for generations. With that said, some climate cafes have already acknowledged these critiques and are actively working on diversifying their environment by making them more accessible to various communities. And that wraps up this episode. If climate cafes are new to you, I hope I've highlighted their importance. If you're familiar with or have already attended one, I hope I've done them justice. As a future clinical social worker, I've learned the value of expressing emotions in a safe space. While not framed as climate action, I hope you see how climate cafes play a vital role in the broader movement. To sum it up in the simplest of equations, safety equals vulnerability, vulnerability equals connection, connection equals community, community equals resilience, and finally, resilience equals action.
Thank you for listening to the Climate Action and Advocacy on the Airwaves. We hope you enjoyed your time here. This project was undertaken with the financial support of the University of Calgary's Mobilizing Alberta Climate Action Grant program. We are broadcasting on 90.9 FM CJSW in Calgary. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the airwaves soon.